Hello to our various attractive and otherwise fans. We are back after a brief intermittent delay because the universe can really catch up with you.
Yeah,
And not
yeah.
not always in the let's say most pleasant ways possible.
No, I don't really have a clever way of talking about this, I guess.
That's okay, we can do a straight attack. I think I've given us enough protective layers of irony for 20 years.
Probably. And this is one of those times where I actually kind of wish that I had written it down, but let's see how I do off the cuff. I think for the last year, for, a number of people, what we are facing, what we are going through has been a horrifying inconvenience. Sometimes a terrifying one as well. And many of us have been lucky enough not to experience the true horror. And more than just the inconvenience of all of this, of the world kind of being turned upside down for this long in such a way that you almost got used to it being upside down. I found myself surprised, let's say, at how different it all felt when I lost someone to COVID. No one's getting names this episode. Just people can find my name if they want. I mean, I say it every week, and they'd be able to probably, given that I'm talking about this, they would probably be able to. But out of respect for the privacy of their family and friends, etc., etc., I'm gonna keep this one anonymous. One of my friends and colleagues passed away last week of COVID, and it was the damnedest thing because I've lost one or two people in my life before. No one is close, and the two of us had actually not even talked in a good long time, just because of all of this, among other things. But even so, like we've been pretty chummy, in a time before, and whenever I've lost someone in my life, the first thing that happens to me is shock. Never tears, really. Never sadness or anything like that. Just this sort of weird feeling like none of this is real. Usually, because the people who I have lost up to now, I have never been too particularly close with. My grandfather, by the way, for example, the two of us had spent maybe about 100 or so hours in one another's presence. If you add it all up over a period of 25 years or so. So when he passed away, and he was not the healthiest of guys,
You may
everyone
recall a past anecdote about that.
everyone had been seeing it coming, right? And everyone had been seeing it coming, and everyone had kind of pre-dealt with it, including my. No, I'm not gonna act like my dad didn't care, but he had. It was something he was ready for, but because the two of us had never really known one another, my last conversation with him, he was so amazingly in the depths of dementia that he barely was able to say a word, and I don't even know that he knew that I was talking to him. I was shocked, and then after I was shocked, it was just sort of a, huh. This time was different. This time, after the shock wore off, I got real fucking angry about just how fucking unfair it was. I would just be thinking about how he deserved better.
He did.
So, because I felt so angry and confused and like I didn't know what to do. And finally feeling that thing that people were talking about. This one thing that people mentioned where it just seems so fucking insane that the world keeps going. That all of these thousands of millions of things that make up a person that all started in one place in time or another and run concurrently, that they all just end all at the same time. And it feels unreal. Impossible, even. To help myself process that, I decided that it was time to return to basically the best fictional property about grief that I can think of, anime or otherwise, which is, of course, 2011's Anohana, the flower we saw that day. And it actually, timing on this is, I'm not going to say good, but by coincidence, let's say,
I guess
this is the 10th anniversary of Anohana's airing.
Really?
Yeah. 2021 is. It actually aired from March to July, so we were about where about 2 or 3 episodes in.
Yeah, everything you were talking about was very real and resonant. And before I launch into whatever cascade of praise or criticisms or jokes that are in my back pocket in terms of today's topic, I would like to just dedicate this moment. The person was bigger than this episode of this podcast, but at least this moment in the universe we walk through, to your fallen friend here, and I will, for a second, do something I don't do often, which is stop talking.
Well, no, it might actually be a good time to start talking because, again, this episode is a little bit off the dome.
A little bit off the dome. Fair enough. As you can see,
I did not come in here with an episode outline. Usually, I want to say about 70% of the time when we do this, I will have an outline or notes or something present.
Oh yeah, that's a bit of an inside baseball for you guys. Yeah, Sam normally has a very effective outline of important points to hit so that we are not just jabbering about the color of someone's shoes the entire time or doing some CinemaSins nonsense, which is really sort of a sign of desperation, but all that aside. Anohana. So, we're coming at this from 2 different angles. This is part of Sam's just media foundation, like, you know, everyone has their sort of constellations and what action is, what drama is, etc.
Yeah, I think if someone were to ask, like, what 5 shows do I need to watch in order to understand you, like, this would easily make that top 5, or would make that 5.
And for a point of
I think Kim Possible would also be on there.
That's a phone. I really enjoy that coming up. And for a point of contrast or comparison, I saw Anohana, drumroll, yesterday.
So you finished it.
I finished it yesterday, yeah. So what's interesting about coming to this is sometimes you can tell a little bit about something's sort of footprint in the media landscape by its detractors and their quality. Where I'm going with this is there was a post upon the insane hell pit of Twitter where one of the trash taste guys said, like, send us your worst takes and we'll react to them. I guess that's a gimmick sort of ripped from Anthony Fantano, but I don't know. We're all running out of shit as things drag on. So I was sifting through these because, you know, I'm interested to see what people, you know, what interior beliefs people think are, you know, going against the grain or revolutionary or whatever.
Yeah.
And one guy's thing was, and this is before we had finished Anohana actually, was, I think that Anohana is a melodramatic, over-the-top, problematic piece of overhyped trash. And I remember this person had a Sword Art Online avatar. And all I could think was, oh, I should watch Anohana. It's going to be some good shit. So this is me coming into Anohana is my point here, and it lived up. It's very weird. I never actually caught much of the evidently extant hype or appreciation for this show.
It's like got a whole bunch of underground appreciation. It's a lot of you know how like your average moviegoer is not really going to know who like Peter Bogdanovich is, but the second you graduate from moviegoer to movie enthusiast, you start to know these things.
So it's in that tier of overall recognition.
I would say so, yeah.
When you get to that tier of recognition, there are things that will live up to it for you and things that won't. And despite how much I slow rolled that, I actually did like this one. I suppose that before I go further, I should just lay out more of what this thing is. So, like Sam said, it came out around 2011, in 2011, not around 2011. Again, 10th anniversary.
Are you in? It's like you're in court and you're trying to be vague.
Yeah. It was an A1 production, and as I said, it is a drama predominantly concerned with grieving. Only it takes an interesting tack. It's
Fun fact: A1 was later did Erased, and Erased is how I learned about the word cuck. That was the first time I heard it used. Like I knew what cuckold meant, but I had never heard it shortened.
Never heard the the pistol whipping version of the word. The 4-letter salute, as one might say. So yeah, it's about grieving, but it takes an interesting tack in that it is a ghost story that sort of just runs on the presumption that the viewer just sort of has a baseline understanding of how the average poltergeist works.
Yeah, it doesn't really have any interest in explaining the mechanics of ghosts to you, or even the mechanics of how ghosts in this work, because that's not really what it's there for. It is not a fantasy story. It's not even really a supernatural story. It has,
not
elements.
in the sense one would typically deploy the word at least. I could make an argument this is more of a not BSE, but this is more of a sort of relevant English class thing that maybe it just shows that there are smarter ways to deploy supernatural structures than we usually do.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, I would say that this is probably just a supernatural story with smart, good preoccupations instead of the usual.
Yes, there's, throughout this, because this is where your head goes, when you watch media, you had this idea that after the second episode or so,
oh god, this shit.
The ghost girl was going to start giving the hero missions
oh yeah,
to fight other ghosts.
I've detected another soldier of the Demon King. Hindsight being 2020, I think there's a reason I also had that specific vision of a way this could get shittier. Which is, in terms of weird timing, by the way, you can tell by context the person who died is a young girl. It's about 5 years later we pick up with the characters.
5 years, yeah. I think the way that I understand it is that premise-wise, or premise too, we should probably cover that, right?
We'll get there, but let me just get this point.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, this young girl dies in this TV show. Very tragic. I had read, because I still have from my fucking review blitzes, and I just keep up the scene, like the Shonen Jump subscription. Mm-hmm. So I just read all of that stuff, mostly not great, that they put out each week. Mm-hmm. And Jujutsu Kaisen had sort of a 10-issue prequel kind of thing, where the concept was... I'm not accusing them of ripping it off. I'm saying they took the same premise, went somewhere way dumber with it. But a young girl dies with this new protagonist of this prequel series, and she becomes this young boy's punch ghost and helps him solve edgy crimes. And I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Is this... What's it like having the emotional depth of a fucking urinal?
Let her rest!
Jesus Christ. What the fuck is wrong? So yeah, it was really funny to read that. And, I just sort of like flicking Jujutsu Kaisen in the forward every now and then because of whatever countercultural impulse I have. Or given its aesthetic, I guess countercultural. Whatever. I'm a double hipster. The point. Going into the premise here. Mm-hmm. The show has a great thing in that I think when I watch most things that are about some kind of tragedy or grieving, I have a tendency to zone out a little bit because the sort of limit of mortal writing is that I think unless you have a pretty strong metacognition, your take on grieving will be somewhat singular, one note, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And what I actually really liked about this is that it essentially refracts itself through sort of five approaches. Okay, seven, eight, but
A
whatever.
lot.
A bunch of approaches to grief filtered through different personality types.
That's what I fucking love about this.
Yeah.
Is and I would actually wanted to get to that very point. Is that Anohana is this show that recognizes that grief is different in every person, and sort of how one responds to tragedy is never going to be the same from one person to another, and that can do things to people's relationships with one another when they are both grieving over the same thing, over the same person. The premise of the show, and this show is breathtaking in how much it does with such an immensely simple premise. Is that 5 years ago, when they were all 9 or 10, a group of friends lost one of their own in an accident that's never shown, we're never even told what it was, although it is strongly implied every now and again.
What's that thing they say? Attentive readers will notice.
Attentive readers will notice, yeah. And then 5 years later, all of them have drifted apart and kind of none of them are exaggeratedly what would I call it? Exaggeratedly worse off, I guess. Not worse off is not the word. None of them are exaggeratedly fucked up, I suppose.
It does not. I always talk about walking over the line or falling off the tree or tumbling off the balance beam. And I think it's particularly apt in this show. Mostly because I can really easily imagine a worse version of, say, the character who... Okay, spoiler town here. Like the character who ends up picking up the mouth cross-dressing thing.
Yeah.
Or the character who sort of becomes a... He's been a shut-in for about 3 months. This is one of those shows I can very easily imagine a shittier version of. And it has a good eye for... It has a good eye for its characters, though, and...
Oh, wait, we forgot to mention the very important part.
Yo.
Which is that 5 years after her death, the girl, the member of this friend group who died, comes back all of a sudden as a ghost. Doesn't actually even remember, anything that happened up to them, or know exactly why she's there, other than probably to finish some unfinished business, as ghosts need to do.
Oh yeah, and in terms of ambiguity, plotment of figuring out what's going on, so she has no idea why she's back, the mechanics of this place, neither day, and I also kind of liked the sort of spread of immediate priority when faced with the idea of this ghost thing as a legitimately existing thing among the characters, but that's not as important as the grief thing, which is the actual intellectual heart of the thing. But I'm a fucking nerd, so that's kind of interesting.
What
to
added
me.
texture?
Yeah,
it added some really nice texture, and you don't necessarily notice its presence, but you'd notice its absence.
And I enjoyed how the sort of friend with a simple sort of follower mindset just bought it immediately. There was the sort of hard-edged guy who had the very understandable my
fucking ass
reaction,
and not coincidentally was the one who had always kind of resented the protagonist, even back when they were friends.
I really appreciated... They didn't draw it out because you can't without ruining the tone of the thing, but I wanted a second of it, and they did, where just two of the girls had the dead walk amongst us kind of reaction. I think that's something that would happen.
No.
But, sidebars aside, as they say, let's go over some of these individual reactions, I guess, to the grieving setup. So we have our main POV man, Jinta,
who We don't really get to know much of how he's been over the last couple of years, but it's sort of implied that he's just been kind of getting worse. He's not dealt with it. He's been sort of avoiding dealing with it, and it has let him become very misanthropic. And 3 months or so prior to the beginning of the show, he just stopped attending school. He couldn't fucking deal with being around people. And his immensely understanding dad is like, okay, do what you gotta do.
It's interesting because in the range of choices you could have made, he could have been a shut-in ever since that day. And, my eyes slowly roll to the back of my skull, and I start looking up gifs of people doing flips and basilisk.
That's the thing is that it could have happened. You could have an apologist be like, I'm like there are people out there. It's like, yes, I know, it's.
But there are choices you make in drama.
There are choices you make, like it does register to your average viewer as immensely over the top were you to do that, and it's interesting how nothing is ever made to be too over the top in this show.
And that's the thing. And more important than, well, not more important, but another thing that works is that it kind of adds to this character idea that this has been sort of building up inside of him this whole time.
Just his inability to grieve.
His inability to grieve,
because he just hasn't done it. He hasn't done it at all. None of them have, really. None of these. There's 5 of them now. These 5 friends have been able to grieve. And
everyone sort of freezes in a stage. I mean, literal classical stage. So maybe you could break down that chart. Some writers approach it that way. I haven't thought it through that way, so I'm not gonna introduce that idea. Mm-hmm. But everyone is definitely frozen in a moment, in a station that you might stop at in a healthy grieving pattern, but they have not gone to that green hill zone beyond it.
No, they all have found like various different coping mechanisms that are ultimately not helping them. So you've got Jintan, the protagonist, who has sort of hardened himself to the point that he's just shut himself up in his room. You have his next door neighbor, Anaru, who kind of has fallen in with like not the greatest crowd, has sort of created a persona for herself that's just not her.
She's created basically an intentionally superficial life that's easier to live in.
That's easier to live in than the one that she probably should be living in.
Yeah.
You've got the former, you were calling him like this sort of follower, Papo.
Yeah, Papo is wonderful tonally, by the way. Like he's
exactly what you need from a comic relief, and yet everything about him is just so immensely relatable that he never seems too outlandish in how he is treated.
Well, when something is basically anywhere between like a weepy or a coming of age drama and the whole space between it, a great shell game that you want to, it's not the only thing you can do, obviously, but a great shell game you can try to play with your comic relief characters is basically 6 episodes of, man, isn't this guy wacky, and 4 episodes of because his mom died.
What his whole deal is that he dropped out of school, started working part-time jobs, and has been just traveling as much as he can with the money that he makes from them these last 5 years or so. When I first watched this show, the reveal of specifically why he's been doing this, reduced me to a sobbing mess. That was like the first of like the 1, 2, 3 at the last 10 episodes of the last not at 10 episodes, the last 10 minutes or so of the final episode.
I think you could make an entire MBTI personality chart for people who like engage with the story straightforwardly, aren't trying to score fucking Twitter points, whatever. And just what moment was closest to fucking you up or fucked you up the most, or just saddest to you in Anohana. I think that's at least in my head. I think it might just reflect either what's kicking around in your own brain, or just how you process things. Or
okay, I think the first moment that I cried in this show was the scene in I guess, little back of house at the video store when Naru admits her guilt to Jintan. Right, why she's felt guilty this entire time, and he just is not in a state where he's ready to hear it, and just does not register that she has told him this, and then like just goes back out and greets a customer.
Really like. Basically, in any dramatic face-off that is not with Yukiyatsu, because that one's sort of a different emotional energy, his disconnect and disassociate thing is so consistent. I don't know, it lends something to the character for me. I like it. I guess another brief sidebar here for me, and it's a small scene. And I guess it's because maybe when things are intentionally hitting a dramatic peak, I always have my cool guy arms crossed. But there was just this quiet scene where the dad was talking to his dead wife photo in a sort of upbeat way, like giving her his little updates on what's going on for the day. I can just hear that jazz remix of "Come Susser Todd" that was going around the internet for a while back there. That was a good scene. So yeah, Papo's thing is great.
Yeah,
Papo's thing is great. Yukiyatsu is kind of my favorite character in this. I think just because I'm a writer and they took a wide swing and didn't hit themselves in the face with it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, Yukiyatsu essentially comes in framed as someone who is intentionally judgmental of everyone. He has something to say about everyone, and lo ex behold,
it's always a condemnation.
It's always a condemnation. And lo ex behold, it's because his insides are twisted up in every direction. Literally every insult he has for another human being in this show applies to himself.
Though I think the one mistake that the show made was when they actually explicitly tell you that. And I think
that line could have totally had been cut without.
That line could have been
anything.
cut. I think that line probably shouldn't have been there. This show is usually so damn subtle. It usually refuses to outright tell you anything. It does such a fantastic way of showing it through the way that the characters talk to one another. Occasional little flashes of a flashback. Like, really emphasis on the flash part of flashback here. Just when the show kind of chooses to, I don't know, to have, that dramatic pause, or, like when someone is talking about something and then can't not really bring themselves to continue talking about it, and you wonder why, and, the answer is, is in that pause, right?
Right.
They do that a lot, and I found it to be pretty effective. And then there's just this one line where, one of the characters is like, oh yeah, anything, all these things that he's saying, he's actually saying about himself. And it was the one time that I felt like the script kind of slipped up just a little bit.
It was a little bit of a slip. I'm like, that line came out for a second. I thought, are you watching Goku fight? And so yeah, they could have done without that, but few things are literally perfect in this world. Except certain episodes of Brotherhood. That was a gag, I'm just a fanboy.
And this thing's final episode. Like, honest to fucking God. There's Tsuruko,
whose name I briefly forgot, and she really shrinks into the background of every situation habitually.
Yeah, I mean, that is sort of kind of her way.
Yeah.
She's just sort of quiet and resentful, and has managed to convince herself that you could think your way out of grief. Like you could beat it. You could beat it by like saying, you don't make sense. I make sense, and I can, like, you're irrational. I can be smarter than you.
Yeah, she might have an entry in a notebook somewhere saying, sadness is actually several chemicals leaking from the back of the mind into the forefront.
Shit like that,
which you can reduce with conscious thought and several meditative procedures.
She is the character who maintains the most steadfast of facades. Mm-hmm. She is, still very, even after a number of characters have grown resentful of one another, right? She is, unfailingly polite and civil to everyone, right? She is being the person who has moved on from this. She is acting like the person who has moved on from all of this. The most out of any of them.
She is. She reminds me of a conversation I had once when it was suggested to me that I ought to be trying out therapy. And I said, "Oh yeah, no, I already went through therapy. Went through the whole loop." And they said,
I'm
"You don't
fixed now.
you don't beat therapy. This isn't a fucking gauntlet." To which I said, "I had 9 potions. I rocked it. Look at my therapy score. Check that shit out."
I've still got 8 potions left. I only needed 1.
So I get Suruko's bit in this show.
Suruko was the one who I had to figure out the most, honestly.
I think interpreting her as somewhat stymied by she has to live in the unfortunate role of being a quiet character on a quiet show.
Yeah, I think if anyone gets the least amount of emphasis in this show, it is her.
One might call her a wiki character, someone you might understand more upon your fucking AV Club rereads of the program than while actually watching.
It's almost by design that she feels so adjunct.
Fair enough.
I think one of this show's strongest, one of the strongest aspects of this show, insofar as its attitude, is that it really, really refuses to condemn any character, any one character. It does not seek to judge them at all, and who they are and what they're going through and how they are dealing with this, even as they are occasionally kind of awful to one another.
It does do what a lot of good interpersonal dramas do, which is realize it doesn't really need a hard moral opposition to lob tomatoes at.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the situation. The problem is the emotional sneaker tread that everyone is wearing on a different part of their soul.
Yeah.
And it does a good job of giving everyone that it focuses on their strong points and their emotional lows.
We never talked about Minma.
We never really did talk about Minma.
We didn't talk about Minma. She is the ghost. She is the one who died 5 years ago. And still,
Memna, her whole bit is, well, as far as I took it, I could be missing something very basic here and smack me in the forward or whatever. But because she died, she is essentially mentally frozen at that age, at that moment.
Doesn't actually seem to have much grief to speak of, really.
Only really seems to have the grief of
knowing that she's not going to
a
be
life
here.
Uncompleted,
yeah,
everything that she can't experience, and really just coping with the amount of grief that one might feel just watching the ones you love, suffer in the aftermath of something that. Being dead is kind of an interesting one because it's like it's not your fault, but it feels like it's your fault. It's
at times, yeah. She
I can't really relate. I haven't died too many times, but
I did once, but only for a couple of minutes. Her frustration, with her powerlessness, the powerlessness of death. That's an interesting idea. It's kind of taken for granted that you have no more agency. Well, here's the thing: she is very powerful. In her memory, and the memory of her that exists in all of these people, but she does not have any agency because the way that this show works is that only Jintan can see her. She appeared to him and only to him, and is. And because he is so fucking emotionally unavailable, she doesn't she ends up sort of having to fight to get him to
acknowledge
the situation. Even though she does not have that clear picture of what needs to be done herself.
Yeah.
And then to try to get him to move on as she sort of comes to her character arc is realizing why she's here. And realizing what she wants out of all of this. what she was sent here to do.
As they dearly departed, she receives a little less of the I know what the technical term would be, but like core flaw treatment than some of the others. But she is given basically the idea that her eye is never really on herself to the degree that it causes additional problems.
Yes. She's kind of
Martyr complex.
martyr complex. She's yeah, I guess selfless to a fault.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would just end up repeating what you were talking about. She ends up being this interesting little vertex. She both was and is. Was when she was alive and is even more now that she is dead. This fascinating vertex in their friend group, around which all sorts of fucking drama was happening. Because, kids have crushes on one another.
Have crushes on one another. You can create a whole drama diagram, and if any vertex of that diagram bites it, it's gonna leave a mark. Something I really enjoyed in this show.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a different point, but I just wanted to run across it because I've seen my share of one-person bit style little dramas in my time, and this thing does a way better job of tonal variety than a lot of things in, I guess it's genre or emotional wavelength, or let's just say media with its goals.
Yeah.
Do like it's, and I think that serves it well because having these moments that are lighter or more human focused, or at least just some variety. I don't know, when you make a thing about loss, I think you do benefit from, without diving all the way into the flashback hole, giving us an idea of what light in life you do lose when this person is gone, and a part of that is that you might have to have some scenes that aren't fucking miserable.
Yeah, the show never becomes self-serious.
Yeah.
Or
I guess, what's the word for maudlin?
Maudlin, melodramatic.
Wankfest in the contemporary parlance.
No, it never gets to such a point where it's just
like, I don't know, you ever seen The Crow? Read The Crow, never actually saw The Crow, only read it.
I like the comic book a little bit better. I think a lot of people think that the movie was better than the comic book. I don't know.
I'll have to revisit that.
I think the movie ended up being like a little bit too. They made it like a Hollywood story.
I think that whenever you make something about revenge and then it hits Hollywood, any subtler thoughts you might have had will go to the wayside. Like, total tangent to Anohana, but just while we're here, you can read. The best breakdown of this was shit. Okay, so it's 2 degrees off because I was reading a funny 1-900 hot dog article about it. That's Sean Baby and crew, and then that linked to a serious article about this. So this is my original thought, but basically the Death Wish films are adapted from the Death Wish novel, and that novel does not have a positive view of hardcore vigilante justice at all. The novel triple underlines that this guy is a psychopath with intense overtones of like race warriorness, and the whole book ends with him basically getting himself gunned down, going after random kids. And there is none of that in the... Is it 3-4 Death Wish movies they made?
There was a lot of them, and then they made one with Bruce Willis, and it fucking blew.
And my point here is that whatever your nuanced or lack thereof thoughts are on revenge in your media property, as soon as it hits a California camera, it's going to be about how sweet and awesome road hauling people is.
I remember the original author of The Crow actually turned against it because he thought that it glorified revenge. I believe he was writing it as a way of processing his grief. As I believe his wife, fiance, girlfriend, I think his significant other died, and I might be misremembering it. I might actually be remembering a different property, but I'm pretty sure that it was The Crow.
I've actually read the interview you're talking about. Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, that is so he wrote it as a way of processing his grief. He wrote a kind of revenge story because grief can make you really fucking angry. As I have learned. And
man, that anger can be really visceral. Like, I became very self-paranoid when I was dealing with my own shit. Because I could feel... It almost becomes like that anger is looking for a home. And it's something that can easily be wrapped up in any ongoing, like, meta or national or local problem. Like, it can just distort how you interact with external information. And I felt I had to become very careful, or I mean, maybe not as careful as some people, because unfortunately I can sort of just become a neutral Ray style robot for a bit when coping with such things. But yeah, the anger of Grease Cartwheel. And speaking of how close this show's thumb is on in terms of like processing death, attentive readers might be interested to know that there is a production connection between this show and Iron Blooded Orphans.
Also Gundam Iron Blood Orphans, same writer-director duo, worked on both shows.
Wild stuff.
And it's interesting in that they are amazingly, wildly different shows.
Wildly different shows. Like, if this is like fucking Magnolia, Iron Blooded Orphans is a better version of Scarface.
Yeah, but the what's interesting is that they are amazingly different from one another, and yet you can still trace one or two of the same themes. For instance, just kids are given a thing that they cannot even fucking hope to process, and then they don't process it, right?
They don't process it. People that are essentially the aftermath of an incident are in Iron Blooded Orphans a lot.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting, down to our local Char analog, who is essentially the aftermath of his wackadoo childhood in that thing.
God, it was so fucking sad how that all unfolded. Oh, also in that neither of the series, in how the events unfold, end up being necessarily too surprising. Everything kind of... There are one or two little twists and turns in each one. In Anohana, which I've viewed most recently, of course, you get the occasional little twist, little turn, little bit of information reveal. But mostly it's sort of about watching these characters having to move forward.
Yeah, they are not programs that are really dedicated to pulling the rug out from under you. Even in Iron Blooded Orphans, double spoiler town, 3, 2, 1, when it has its total party wipe.
Yeah.
It feels more like the natural slow winding of consequences for like 12 episodes.
Exactly. Like
any kind of like last army stand twist.
Yeah, they do this thing in Iron Blooded Orphans where they keep kind of alluding to this miracle that could happen, and then it doesn't.
Yeah, there aren't really twist deaths in Iron Blooded Orphans as much as there are just disappointments in binary scenarios, I guess.
Yeah. And
it's set up in a way where it's the logical thing that could happen. You understand why it happened, and I guess what I sort of appreciated about that show is that it kind of reminded me of our relationship with heroic myths and how it tends to create both, not just in certain narratives, like not even as a media thing, just even in the way we process reality and how we think of how our struggle is going to work out. This assumption that we are faster, better, born of righteousness on our side, and that events will bend themselves towards that. And that's not the way the universe works.
Nope, not even in the fucking slightest.
Not in the fucking slightest. Even if you are Genghis Khan's fourth kid, you just assume that the hit train is going to keep on coming. Like, no, your liver is failing and your empire is falling apart. Also, there's nothing righteous about the Khans. I was just trying to think of someone who would have envisioned themselves
who would have thought of
staying
themselves
winning.
as like, oh yeah, Scourge of God. Yeah. That's me.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, that was the Huns. Well, whatever the case.
Yeah, you get the idea. So I appreciate that about Iron Blood Orphans, but going back to Anohana Land, it's also a place where again, nothing is really crazy about the things people have done or their reactions to it. The closest it gets to like a traditional, I don't know, dramatic hyper twist is when Yukiyatsu had been doing some like background cross dressing stuff in his own time.
Mm-hmm.
But as a revelation, it's not something that like unmoors what could happen going forward or what goes on ahead. It just shows what he's been dealing with in his own time.
Yeah.
And how it sort of, again, reflected his particular personality. Something I should have explained in terms of my appreciation for that character, by the way, is beyond the criticism stuff, is that he has constructed himself into a hyper straight arrow to the point where he looks like almost like rom-com protagonist model C.
Yes, he looks like the most generic fucking anime protagonist of all time, because that's sort of how... It's not even how he envisions himself, because he knows he's not that.
But he has...
It's what he aspires to be. It's what he wishes he were.
He has really made this construct after presumably some intense Kaguya viewings. And you can see there's something being just sort of pushed down there.
Or more pushed out onto other people.
Okay, yeah, it's an exported product. I should say, amidst this show's achievements, given its overall tone, topic, genres, that often when I'm presented this kind of material, one of my first reactions as a petulant child is to look and say, how can I fuck with this when we talk about it? And I did not do so much of that. None of that because I'm broken inside, but I did not do so much of that. And I think it's sort of important to not only gauge how I react to something, but how you typically react to things and what it might say relative to the base. And I think that speaks to it as a strong work in its Milo.
Mm-hmm.
I totally did not pronounce that word correctly, by the way.
Milieu.
That being said, I would like to drop in at least one of my 3 dumb jokes.
All right, go for it.
First off, in my eternal ripping off Dave Chappelle bit, I would like to introduce a spin-off or a remake of Anohana that I call Jamaican Anohana. In Jamaican Anohana, this tragedy happens, and then no one ever talks about it again. And all these characters sit in the same room talking to each other, putting on normal faces. And then it ends. It just fucking ends. The credits just roll down. What a time. What's the last
Strange,
thing?
that sounds like Irish Anohana, too.
Oh, yeah, maybe? Man, don't get invaded by England. I don't know. They just export that shit.
They just make you not want to feel things. They're so awful. They're so awful that not feeling anything is better.
Oh, great. You know, normally on Weeaboo Hell, there's a little segment where Sam Go talks about the character designs. Do you want to throw anything in on that topic?
I mean, they're fantastic. Honestly, they're so good that you don't even notice how good they are, because you're really just more focused on the character drama, right? But I sort of like the All right, so we'll kind of start from the top here. Gen 10, right? As this kind of shonen protagonist who's stopped giving a shit about how he looks. So like he hasn't had a haircut in for fucking ever.
Yeah,
He'll just like wear like whatever fucking t-shirt that day. It's implied that he does not shower every day of the week. Although apparently not everyone does. I know I feel real fucking greasy after more than like 18 hours awake. Or 18 hours without a shower.
You can really tell how close to a temperate zone people live based on their answer to that and their relative cleanliness. But that aside, yeah, he does have this light grunginess to him that sort of underlines the disaffectitude.
The disaffectitude, yeah. You've got Menma, right? Who, of course, you know, being a ghost, is dressed all in white. And it's almost winking at that because it's the same thing that she was wearing when she died.
It has a thing that the first nanosecond I saw her, I was like, what are you doing? But she looks like a 16-year-old wearing a 12-year-old's outfit.
Yeah.
And,
And it's like, oh.
Oh, man, I was gonna dunk.
I, fun little anecdote. I was showing this to another friend last year, and when basically the first scene plays out, and we were watching it, and she was like, "Okay, this is interesting. I'm wondering what this is about." And then like the first 5 seconds of the OP happen, and she's like, "Oh no." When like they're all lined up, and then they age up, except one of them's gone now. Oh, also this show has one of the best OPs of all time. It's fucking perfect.
It's got a lot of fun small cues. It's framed well. I always feel like I'm a little less equipped to talk about these OPs, but it has. If I were to be very specific, it opens with the child group shot, and then as Sam says, it cuts to one of them being gone, and none of them are making eye contact with each other anymore. They are looking specifically they're all looking away from each other. Would be a better way to put it.
So the character designs. Yukiatsu, right? We were going into his character design. He looks like generic anime guy because that's who he wishes he was. Poppo is so much less free than he thinks he is. Mm-hmm. So again, he dresses a little bit more like how he aspires to be. He dresses down all the time. He's always wearing Hawaiian shirts because like he's got to be on vacation. He's got to be on vacation so he can be seeing anything other than what's in his head at every hour of the day.
Poppo makes both the only literal physical effort to run away from his problems and is also Spoiler Town 3000 put himself to live at the site of the accident, in which is just an action that just leads to a therapist just chucking their notes out the window saying, "You threw it all away! all this work, and you threw it away."
Because, as it turns out, Poppo witnessed Menma's death, and the image has been so seared into his brain that literally everything he has been doing up to now has been trying to get it to go away for 10 fucking seconds, but it won't.
Yeah. Really just ask the question, what is the event that forces you to start trying to act like the Fonz?
Yeah. God, it's such a fucking perfect moment when, like, we get that reveal.
To borrow a Moxleyism, it's such good shit.
It's such good shit. Anaru, as we mentioned earlier, right? She's sort of she's fallen in with this kind of very preppy crowd, right? Yeah. And she never actually seems to be wearing the same outfit twice, which is fun in this little show. She's got this giant fucking wardrobe, and it always kind of feels like a costume because it sort of is for her.
She really wants to affect the air of being the protagonist of Genki and Aru Adventures midair jump, and that's not the life that she
not that I'm trying to be talking shit about Visco girls right now or anything like that, but like Anaru is just, she's not that person. It's just.
By the way, if you are a adult human being who has dedicated significant amounts of times to making fun of Visco girls, it is not normal to be thinking about or making fun of 14-year-old girls. That's all I'm going to say.
Especially because I'm almost certain that you are not 14 yourself. You're in fact significantly older than that. Grow up. Fjallraven bags are fine.
Here's a good rule of thumb. Are they carjacking you? No? Leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
Also, on 14-year-old girl, if they're carjacking you, if it's not a firearm situation, you might put some resistance into that situation. Lay some CQC in, is all I'm saying.
You might be able to stop them.
I'm not trying to carjack shame anyone.
Suruko. Her character design. Again,
don't look at me, I'm fine.
Very restrained, like she is. She's fine. She's over this. She's dealt with this. Look, she's an adult now. She's basically an adult now.
It's like, I'm basically an adult now. I'm dressed like your mom. Don't worry about it.
Like, and, oh man, you've been having such a hard time dealing with this. You're so mature. It's fine. It's fine. Like, I am mature enough not to be immature about how immature you're being right now. But basically.
But anytime you want to stop, anytime you want to stop.
Stop it! I'm making her sound bitchier than she actually is.
It's funny to play it up because the show dials it down.
The show does dial it down quite a bit.
That is basically one of the autopilots for humor, is to just make a quiet thing loud.
It's weird that this show gets
Take that freebie, kids.
It's weird that any like of the few detractors that this show have accuse it of being melodramatic, because it's just super fucking not. It's like all these tiny little moments that
I mean, you know what the black internet ritual is. You draw the pentagram on your hand, stand atop the mountain, raise it to the sky, and yell, "Good things are bad, bad things are good," and a bolt of black retweets goes into your arm.
and it creates the Snyder Cut.
And it creates the fucking Snyder Cut. I don't know if we've done an episode since the Snyder Cut. I think we did one. I just know there was that one Paul Feige fucking tweet saying, there's 4 hours of Ghostbusters I'd like to share with the world.
No one even wanted to see the first hour and a half.
And I'm just wondering what has been unleashed.
God damn it.
I can tell you that editorial restraint is about to take one to the kidneys, but
I like stories where characters change over the course of the story and
That's
are not
nice.
just worshipped. Wait, no. If we start bitching about the Snyder Cut, we're not going to stop.
God, that might just be an addendum. Okay.
It's 7% better than the Whedon Cut.
The Snyder Cut feels less like being punched in the balls and more like being punched in the stomach. Congratulations. Anyway, did we cover the full range of character design? I like his dad's character design a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Jinten's dad.
He went bald.
He went bald.
He went bald. He got a hat.
He got a hat. It is not an aging or hormonal baldness. He is sad.
It's great because you can tell that he's not quite over the loss of his wife. Oh, yeah, he is sad not because his son's friend died, but because his wife died. The main character also lost his mother. That it seems like a year or so before Menma died. His mother passed away from what can be assumed to be cancer. Mm-hmm. That just her plus Menma, bridge too far for the guy.
Not great. He and his mother and Memna were also consciously, I should say, because it's the kind of thing one might fuck up. They are sort of within a personality standard deviation for each other, which can just take. Hey everyone, today we're making trauma gumbo. And let me tell you, these mushrooms are my secret weapon. I might be out of particularly salient points about Anohana, but I do want to underline that if you haven't seen...
Eighth grade English. I love this thing's use of symbols.
All right, everyone, we're going to go into the shiny things of Anohana and what they mean.
So literally just two of them. Three. There's three or so recurring symbols, right? And they all relate to one another. So you've got flowers, the secret base, and fireworks. Flowers representing endings, fireworks representing new beginnings, and the secret base representing where we're stuck right now.
And boy, does Papa live in the secret base.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Flowers, in that they are beautiful and also die very quickly. I've also seen fireworks used as a symbol for aspiration in other stuff, specifically Kaguya-sama.
Maybe that's just a more embedded cultural thing than we know.
It could be. A lot of the time, apparently in a lot of Japanese media, an airplane is used as well, specifically for shit that is futile. Because, it's an airplane flies by and it is a dream that is very much out of reach, right?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Only seems to exist in Japanese media. Never seen it used here.
That's interesting.
Except in Kato Shoujo. Technically counts as here.
Amidst the ever-complicated diagram of cultural diffusion. Anyway, this might surprise you, but attentive readers might notice that I recommend Anohana.
It is just a wonderful show. It is a it's no substitute for therapy if you are experiencing grief. Everyone could really stand to talk to someone about that, about anything really.
Yeah,
You should talk to someone.
it's a good
Dear
idea.
listener. Just because, honest to God, if you have lived through the last year, then you probably have something to talk about.
Anyway, this has been Weeaboo Hell.
It's
It is
Weeaboo Hell.
Weeaboo Hell. Enjoy yourselves.